Welcome back to Junction 119. This is Kellen,
This is Casen.
and we're back after 2 weeks off. I want to go ahead and both apologize to and thank both the listeners, viewers, and you, Kason, because you heard how I've been suffering from a cold. You said you were sick a couple weeks ago.
Mhm.
I have never had a cold that completely shot my voice like this one is, and this is as much of a voice as I've had in the last 2 weeks, going on 2 weeks, and you heard it
Wow.
at its
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
heard it at its worst. So. Um, Good
Oof.
to be back. I know some stuff has happened. We're here to talk about it, but
Just
uh
a few things. Just a
yeah,
few
just a
things.
few things that happened when we don't have a show for 2 weeks, which with how as often as we commit to doing this case, and it felt like a long time off.
Yeah.
Especially even when a whole first round of both the NBA playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the NFL draft all happened in that amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. It happened to be a very packed time.
Yeah, so much so that I'll go ahead and just extend a thank you to friend of the show James, because he was on our last show as we as we previewed the beginning of the MLB season, gave our predictions for that. Kason, it's good to see you, my friend. I see you're all Cavs. You got your Cavs gear on. Uh, yep, he's got. I assume it's a Cavs hat you have on too.
Yeah.
There you go. There it is. His Cavaliers are in the second round against the Celtics. We're gonna get into that situation. The order of our show today is we're gonna go draft, NBA, NHL, and then at least I am gonna review the Fallout show at the very end of the episode here. I don't know if you've seen any of it, Kason, at all.
Yeah, I have seen the first couple episodes.
Okay, that's good
Yeah.
enough. That's good enough. That's cool. You have context. We'll get there when we get there. Also, wanted to at the top of the show extend a happy Mother's Day out there, because it is going to be Mother's Day the day after this comes out.
Hmm.
So to my mom, your mom as well, Kason,
Yep. To my
uh,
mom.
and all of the mothers by extension in our lives and beyond that consume our show. We appreciate and love you for what you do.
Absolutely. And for a little added treat, for what is always a bit of an unfortunate overlap for her. My mother's birthday is today when we're recording on
Oh
Friday.
wow! Oh, well, happy
So
birthday to her!
so the like almost every couple of years her birthday falls
Wow.
on Mother's Day and she only she only gets one day.
One day, I mean, so without getting too into it, do you save gifts, like table gifts? Because my mother's
I
birthday is in December.
Yeah, I
Obviously,
mean
holiday. Yeah,
when we were growing up, we always did our best to at least make it a week long thing just as much as we could.
that's cool. That's cool. Well, hey, this will be Saturday by the time this comes out. So happy birthday to her as well, and happy
Mhm.
Mother's Day. So that's awesome. I'm glad. Thankfully, we did a show this week.
Yeah.
They didn't have a voice, but hey, man, we'll get into it. Obviously, the draft happened a few weeks ago now. The dust has long since settled, but we didn't get a chance to talk about it. I figured we'd obviously give our thoughts on our teams and at least the first round, because there was some pretty decent drama in those first 12 picks. What do you want to get into first?
Yeah, let's go ahead and go to the draft first. We'll just do some cleanup, give some of our draft thoughts, and then we'll work into the playoff
Sounds good.
series that we need to catch up on.
You
So
want to talk about like the first round, just kind of things that happened?
yeah. So going into the draft, everybody knew Caleb Williams. At least there was some question over whether or not they were going to trade it like a month ago, like within the last couple of months, but pretty much for the last month, it's been pretty obvious the Chicago Bears were going to take Caleb Williams, number one, and they did. So that was quite uneventful. And then uh, in the last month, it became pretty clear Jaden Daniels as well, the quarterback from LSU, was going to go to Washington
Yep.
and be a commie, and that happened as well as predicted. And then pretty much after that was where things were open up for some potential craziness going on. The default pick was North Carolina quarterback Drake May going to the Patriots. That is what ended up happening. But up until I think draft night, there was still the door opening for the Patriots to trade down. Because I don't think they were 100% sold on May being a top tier talent. And so they probably didn't get any offers that they felt warrant or worthy of the number 3 pick, so they just took May there. And then
Yeah.
the first non-quarterback, Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals. So that was the big one. And then throughout the rest of the first round, the big overarching theme was offensive players. It for the first time in the draft,
In the history of
it
the draft.
in the history
Yeah.
of the draft, there was not a defensive player selected until number 15.
It was the
The
first
Colts.
time. It was the first time for sure in the first 10 picks that there hasn't been a
Yeah.
defensive player. And yeah, we right. Not until pick 16 did we get a defensive player. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, he was one of only what 4 guys on defense taken in the first round.
No, it got a little bit more defensive heavy towards the rest of the first round, I
No,
think.
you're right. Like 5 guys. Like
Um,
the rest were edge rushers, and then you got CB at the end there.
yeah, yeah. So you've got yeah, some edge rushers. There's the guy from Toledo, went to the Eagles at 22.
Of course.
The Lions got a defensive back from Alabama too. But yeah, it was pretty offensive heavy for the most part in the first round, which is probably a good thing because they did talk about it in the draft too, which was statistically speaking, this was kind of one of the worst offensive years in a while. Like there have been a lot of teams. Well, I mean, it probably was, heavily contributed to the fact that there were a lot of quarterbacks that went down. I mean, there were, I mean, you had Rodgers go down immediately, then you had Kirk, you had
Hmm.
Deshaun go out, I mean, you had a lot of Joe Burrow, you had a lot of franchise starting quarterbacks go down relatively early in the season. And so there was a lot of really bad backup quarterback play. And that just sort of led to, offenses not putting up what they typically had been, which, you saw teams and a team like the Chiefs. We talked all
Oh yeah.
season. I mean, I was, heavily contributing to this, but we talked all season about how their offense did not look right. They didn't
No.
have the receivers they needed to. And what did they go out and do? They got Xavier Worthy, the fastest guy in the history of the draft.
Yeah. Thanks.
So
Thanks Buffalo for that. I really like that.
I
Like for yeah, like that. We're jumping ahead, but I will go ahead and get into that real quick. Them trading to the Chiefs and them grabbing David Worthy, essentially replacing Tyreek Hill in that offense, was the most. Oh, okay, so we're just going to collectively like when people. It was like when teams would trade with the Patriots before the draft and during the draft, and it's like, what are we doing, giving the dynasty more weaponry? Like, what are we doing here? Especially you, Buffalo.
yeah, and never forget that the pick that was used to select Patrick Mahomes came from Buffalo.
Buffalo. Yeah, and you know what? I genuinely had forgotten that until they pointed that back out draft night. I thought that was actually
I I
amazing.
don't I don't understand what we're doing. I mean, I can understand that at the time in 2017. It like nobody, they probably didn't even think they were taking a quarterback because they had
No,
Alex Smith. No, there's no reason to think about that if you're Buffalo because they were bad then. So
no,
there's not even a big thing. But now trading with them now when they're gonna get a receiver, like everybody knew they loved Xavier Worthy.
yeah.
Everybody knew that. And
Especially at
so
a time when you just lost a major target of
but
your own, and it's like,
yeah,
why don't you
here's
just
here's the thing. You know
yeah,
who could really use a guy like Xavier Worthy? The
Buffalo,
Bills.
the Buffalo. I was like, well, why didn't you guys just take whatever? It's like, okay. Um, Pulling it back, the one thing I did want to point out is that more quarterbacks were taken in the first round of this year's draft since 1983. And if you recall, 1983 was the Elway to Marino draft. Whole 30 for 30 about it. Solidified what the draft is today. Obviously, two of
Yeah.
the greatest to ever do it were taken in that draft, almost completely on opposite ends of each other. Um, and so I only point that out as to say that I think this is a friend of the show. Matt even said this, that on the night of draft night, which I want to herald it here, sign of the times for sure. It's an offensive league. I think I do think that there is this paranoia of I do think a lot of teams panicked. Okay, we got to talk about the Falcons because obviously that was like the story of the first
I
round, right?
I think the way that this first round with the quarterbacks went down it happened because everybody panicked after pick 8 with the Falcons.
Yes.
They threw everybody's draft board for a loop, and they go, "Oh my, okay, then we got to get our guy
Well,
now."
now we got to get a quarterback. Exactly. Like the teams after them, you had obviously Minnesota and you had Broncos. At that point, it was like, okay, we just got to take who we can because I really think that I really think Minnesota probably would have taken Penix if he was there, causing JJ to
Yeah,
fall, causing Bo Nix to
I
fall.
I I
Yeah.
frequently mocked Penix to Minnesota because I thought the fit made a ton of sense. I'm sure he was probably their number one. Uh, and I think that they were just like, well, I guess this is all we can do.
Right. Well,
Um,
and I remember Mel, I think on even Mel's draft board, of which for the first, it was actually a pretty good first round for draft boards until that Falcons pick just kind of moved everybody up. But a lot of people had the
mhm.
Raiders taking a quarterback if one was still there. And once Bo
I
Nix was
yeah,
off the board, it was like, okay, I guess we're not doing that. Like,
yeah. I mean, I think they definitely would have as well. I mean,
yeah,
I totally agree. I think that I figured they were going to, but I mean, they ended up getting Brock Bowers, which
yeah,
great player, but they just took Michael Mayer last year.
yeah.
So they got back-to-back first-round tight ends, I guess.
Right. And it's
Good for
like,
them.
and I don't blame the Raiders as much as I do, obviously, just how the draft falls.
Yeah.
Um,
So let's circle back. Let's go
to the
back to Michael
Falcons.
Penix Jr. with the Falcons.
Yes.
So
Yes. Obviously, the controversy was they just paid the 4-year big deal to Kirk Cousins. Now you draft Michael Penix Jr. Obviously, the story also was like it looked like Arthur Blank was in no way expecting them to do that to the point where, yeah, that clip of like the GM having to explain it and everything. I got to be honest, I felt better about the pick like after the draft ended because I thought to myself, logically, no, it doesn't make sense. But like in a world where we don't know what Kirk Cousins is going to be, he could be prone to injury again. It's hard to say. If you were worried about this, then maybe not give him as big, like as long of a deal. But in a world where Denver just paid out Russell Wilson to get him off the roster, you got literally two good options at quarterback there. It's just kind of like it would have made more sense to maybe go after something else in free agency if you were going to always take a QB. But you know what I mean?
yeah,
Because now I can actually see a situation where this works out very well for Atlanta. In the moment, I was like, that's head scratching. But now that we're like a couple weeks away, it's like removed from it. I'm like, not a bad room situation there.
I mean, I get it, but the logic just I mean, I can understand sitting there. You pay Kirk a ton of money, and then you get him in the building, and it seems like Terry Fontenot, the GM of the Falcons, might have some more information that is maybe not so like not making him feel so enthusiastic about Kirk's health coming into the fall.
Yeah,
And so, which, okay, fine. I mean, you paid him $180 million guaranteed, I think. So,
you
like,
did. Yeah,
okay, and so now he like needed an urgent backup plan. However, Kirk was not aware of this.
nope.
They didn't tell Kirk about this. He was not made aware that they were going to be searching for backup plans. So it seems like Kirk thinks he's ready to go week one.
Right.
And so surely a decision, which we found out later that a major factor in the reason that Kirk left Minnesota was because Minnesota told him, no matter what, we're taking a quarterback in April.
Right. And
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 so he goes, okay, then I'm going to go to Atlanta. And then they take a quarterback. And he's like, I left Minnesota to come here.
right. I think it was well, a lot of players have said this, but I remember an interview where Terry Crews, the actor, who, if you don't know, had an NFL career, he literally said one time in an interview, I remember this, in like 99% of professional athletes, if they're when their career ends, will tell you it didn't end how they wanted it to, which
Mhm.
makes perfect sense. I mean, how can it? You know what I mean? Like you go out via injury, all this stuff. My point in saying that is this is what the twilight years of like a quarterback career like Kirk Cousins looks like. You can be told bold faced by a team, and then they do something completely different on draft night. Unfortunately, Kirk, you're on the older side, coming off a very significant injury that has a reputation of potentially happening again and or significantly limiting your play. I I don't. I'm going to use this phrase, but I'm not calling him it. Okay, you can look like people can get worried and look like you're damaged goods. I don't think that's what Kirk Cousins is. I really don't. But that's how it can be look. That's how it can look. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
we told you what you told you, but at the same time, it's like, and we have committed to you. We're gonna pay you that money regardless of what happens. So you're taken care of. It's just like, dude, you're not at a situation now where you command the room like you probably would have over the last 3, 4, 5 years. You know what I mean? On top of that,
Yeah.
you can't really get it done in the playoffs. That's known. So it makes sense, but it's sad to see that happen to Kirk. But this is kind of what happens to these guys. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's the point I'm making, really.
Yeah, I mean I get it. I mean it's definitely a thing where I think they might have had a little buyer's remorse with Kirk just because of the situation that, giving what is it, 38, 30, 36, 38 now.
Yeah, it's
A 36, 38-year-old coming off Achilles or ACL, whatever it was.
Achilles. Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention like it's not like he was that mobile to begin with, and so it's just like now he's going to be a statue back
Right.
there behind the center, and so
So when you take all of what we just said into context, it actually kind of makes sense. It's
it
just,
it does make sense.
but
However,
because things change in the NFL in months, even in the offseason, you know?
no, I definitely absolutely see the logic that Terry Fontenot was thinking, because it basically solidifies their floor
Yeah.
of like not being terrible. But I think this was the thing, which was you just paid a quarterback $180 million to win the division and go to the playoffs, and then the first thing you do is to draft his backup.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
when you are terrible on defense, and you could definitely use, like, because they could have had their pick of any defensive player on the board.
oh, absolutely.
There were no defensive players taken before that, so
Yep.
they could have taken any of those edge rushers, linemen, cornerbacks, like anybody that they wanted on defense. They could have taken, and they would have started day one.
If they were
But
in any,
now
yeah,
they put the eighth pick into a guy who's going to sit the bench.
if the Falcons were in any way in any other division in football, I would be like, yeah, that would have been a good way to do it. The fact of the matter is, GM's gonna look like a genius if Kirk Cousins goes down with even a slight injury for a few weeks this year, let alone a season ender. Penix comes in, looks amazing, and they win the division. He's gonna look like a genius. So it's like,
Yeah,
which could
I
definitely
mean,
happen. That's the thing.
yeah, which here, the good thing is, the good thing for them though is that they still have the asset.
Yes.
So I see it incredibly likely Kirk goes down, Penix comes in, he looks as good as or better than Kirk, and they can trade Kirk and get something back for him.
Right.
I mean it. I mean it's possible, definitely.
and maybe you're leveraging this fact of what you said earlier with all those quarterbacks that went down, but wanted to at least address another pick. I did want to say this. I ultimately felt like the Chicago Bears had a good draft. I actually found I went back and looked at a lot of the rankings, and a lot of people had the Bears towards the top of the list of the strong drafts. Steelers are. I'm looking at a post one that NFL has Steelers actually has the number one best draft. I think that's debatable, but it definitely was one of the strong ones. We'll get to that. But for what the Bears needed and for what they got and what their plan was grabbing Caleb. They get Roma Dunze, fantastic, asset there, and they got a lot of assets underneath in their later picks. So thought that was really good. I wanted to point out as well.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll just say Roma Dunze seemed like the guy they wanted at 9 the whole time. That he and Caleb, I guess, had somehow become friends, and so they were working out before the draft, and he made it known to the front office that was the guy he wanted, and they got him for him. So
something else the Bears did on draft night, which was awesome. Those two had taken a picture, like getting off the plane or whatever, like a selfie with each other or whatever. And the Bears on draft night during the first round, after they picked Rome, literally made that their like social media photo on Twitter and a few other places. I thought, now that's awesome. That's really, really that's sharp. I'm like, see, that's the kind of stuff that a social media team that's on it is on board. It's like, yep, we're gonna do that. And they left at that until like their next pick the next day, which was awesome. Shout out friend of the show, Josh actually pointed that out to me. So that was great. We already talked about it. Xavier Worthy, incredible pick for the Chiefs. I don't think necessarily we need to delve back into that. Uh, let me see. Thought Shop Robinson going to from Penn State was going to the Dolphins was a good pick as well. There were no other really head scratching picks. I thought it was overall a very strong first round and a good one for
Mhm.
mock drafts.
So
I will say this. I don't know how JJ McCarthy and Bo Nix, those two guys. I don't
I
know
did at least
how.
want to address
Yeah,
like those two guys are questionable. Like there's a lot of question marks over that,
yeah,
and
and question marks on the teams they were drafted by. It's not
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's not like Vikings and Broncos
I
have it all together. You know.
JJ McCarthy it played JJ McCarthy played quarterback like AJ McCarron. Like
Mm.
it like he didn't like they never asked him to throw much. He never like he was not a gunslinger. He threw the passes pretty accurately that they asked him to, mostly, dink and dunk style down the field.
He
But
managed the offense,
that offense was pretty reliant on Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum.
no question.
And I think I remember there was at least one game where he threw, I think it was the Rose Bowl, he threw like 9 passes or something. Like he did not pass very much. And so that's one of those guys when you're like, I don't know if I can trust taking you in the top 15. Like that's kind of a crazy pick to make.
I don't know. Like the only thing I can think of is like, say Patrick Mahomes didn't exist, right? Bear with me. It's taking a leap, but bear with me. Um, but if you recall, the Chiefs before him were incredible on offense and everywhere except the QB spot. And I thought to myself, if you got a decent game manager in there, that's why Alex Smith worked, here and there
Hmm.
for like as well as he did. And then they got obviously Patrick Mahomes, who is just, godlike, taking them to the stratosphere. But that doesn't really happen in the NFL, is my point. Like, there's not like a perfect system you can go in there. Like, no, you need to be able to be the guy. Uh, and I don't know if JJ can.
I mean, I guess what Aaron Jones is there now. So they have Aaron Jones to be, you know, the to get the to run every play, and
And also
and then
Justin
occasionally
Jefferson.
he can just throw a screen pass to Justin Jefferson
Yeah,
and
that's my thought. Just throw it anywhere generally near Justin Jefferson, and you'll be a half decent QB in a in.
I will actually say though that the Vikings are actually a fairly good team. Like
Yeah,
the roster is relatively good.
it
So
is absolutely. It's
if
solid.
JJ is going to work anywhere, it's going to be Minnesota. Um,
I want to shift to our teams. How did you
yeah.
think the Browns did?
So I mean the Browns definitely were they didn't have a ton of picks. This was the last year that we didn't have a first round pick from the Deshaun Watson trade. So I'm looking forward to, having a first round pick again next year. And then the two like really only notable players that I care about, um, just because of we got some guys in the later half of the round or in the later rounds of the draft that probably aren't going to make the roster, but the two guys that actually I think are going to end up playing a ton are Michael Hall, defensive tackle from Ohio State, and ironically, Zach Zinter, guard from Michigan, which this was a story I kind of at least in Cleveland and this area because Zach Zinter broke his leg in the Ohio State Michigan game. The player that broke his leg by falling on him was Michael Hall.
Really?
So they
Wow.
yes. So pretty quickly after they were drafted on night two, it like the Cleveland media realized like they were looking back at the tape of Zach Zenter's injury and they realized the guy that fell onto his leg was Michael Hall. And so
Wow.
they were like, this is awkward.
I'm sure that clip of that injury was like of that play was circulating among Cleveland
Yeah, and so
circles. Yeah.
they were sitting up there at the in Berea at a press conference together, and they were talking about it. I mean, when stuff like that happens, you don't blame the guy that falls. Like
Oh
he
no,
got
it's the
bumped.
fluke.
Yeah,
That's the flukiest thing ever.
it's
Yeah.
so yeah, and so it's just more or less like a really interesting connection. That the offensive lineman from Michigan, defensive lineman
Oh
from
yeah.
Ohio State.
The worst.
Um,
I will just say I've been on a practice field in high school where a routine scrimmage play caused a very serious injury, and it was a very emotional day for everybody. So
Mhm.
it's one thing when it happens in a game, and now your teammates. When it happens in practice because of someone and someone feels really bad about it, that's the worst situation. So regardless, that's ironic, but also at the same time, it's cool that I honestly also did think I didn't know that Casen, but thought, oh, they take an Ohio State guy and a Michigan guy. So there's people who love the
I
Browns who are going to be very
trust
happy
me.
with
I
both those
trust
players.
me. The fact that the Browns are taking Ohio State dudes again is incredible because there was a long time in there where, like, no matter how good the player was, they didn't want to touch Ohio State dudes. I don't know why,
It's
but
ridiculous.
the but yeah. So Michael Hall, I think he'll be good. He's a relatively lean defensive lineman comparatively. He's I think 6'3", 290 ish. So he's not quite, like a 350 type of just, massive wheel fork type of guy.
He gets injected into what is already a nasty
Yeah.
front like seven there. So
Yeah. So
um,
he'll I think because that was what I thought was probably one of the bigger needs was to get some more depth, some younger depth on the defensive line to account for the fact that we're not going to be able to pay all these dudes pretty soon.
yeah,
So or continue paying them. So that was great. And then we're getting really old at guard, and so Zach Zinter was a great pickup. He probably we got him at 85. He probably would have been top 50 if he hadn't gotten injured. Because that's where I think he was mocked previously going into the end of the season before that happened. So
as a
that
former
was the Browns.
love it. As a former lineman myself, mainly offensive lineman and defensive lineman, I felt like this draft was like the draft of the linemen. It really felt like now, really all drafts are to some
Yeah.
degree, but Troy, I think how you say his name is Faltanu. Is how you say his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can correct me if I didn't say that correctly, because on draft night I didn't hear a single person like say the first syllable of his name correctly. That's how I've been
But
saying it.
Fatanu,
Fatanu.
I
So
think.
that's yeah, because I heard people putting emphasis on the last name, but regardless, offensive tackle out of Washington, he was up there. A lot of people had him graded in the top 10 if someone needed a lineman. So the fact that he fell to the
Mhm.
Steelers, hey, love that. I guess also at points in his life, he was a Steeler fan because people were finding his old tweets and were like, yo, Steeler Nation, whatever, from like years ago. So it's always kind of fun when you see things like that for a guy. Loved that pick. Loved the Zach Frazier pick out of West Virginia. A lot of West Virginia fans are also Steeler fans. A lot of people thought the Steelers would take the offense, or actually take the center out of Duke, and I think he actually ended up going to the Ravens. But
Mhm.
they still needed a center, so they grabbed Zach Frazier. Then it was just kind of like best available. Roman Wilson out of Michigan, thought that was great. And with him being in the Steelers organization now, he's probably bound to be amazing because for whatever reason, wide receivers just turn out great. And then the rest of the guys I didn't really necessarily know a lot about. Peyton Wilson, Mason McCormick, Logan Lee, and Ryan Watts. You kind of had a mixture of defense and mainly defensive in the last, and then we got Mason McCormick, who's out of South Dakota State, who was an offensive guard. Love these picks. Again, we're not spending hardly any money on the QB room because of that whole trade situation. So the fact that they went and said, we are going to get all the dudes who can protect them. And oh, by the way, a few guys who hopefully can build into defensive starters or defensive depth. Having like when I saw like this ranking today, which I found from the NFL, that had us at the number one ranked best draft, I was like, I mean, sure. I mean, you can't really rank a draft. I would rank that's why I like doing the grades. They had us at an A+. You know what I mean? Uh, Ranking a draft class is kind of impossible beyond like 4 years out. But I was overall really happy with the Steelers. It was a Steelers draft. It wasn't flashy. Took nothing but needs, um, and very much showing that they really want to build the offense. And also, Omar Khan's very aggressive. I really think that this is a new age as far as the Steelers go building a team. A little bit of the same as far as the draft approach goes, but I really wouldn't be surprised if the offense looks much better this coming year. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I will agree. Unfortunately, I also really did love your guys' draft. The
You disliked it as a fan, liked it as
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
as a football analyst.
As yes, yes, and in a non, partisan manner, I thought they did a great job of, because the offensive line was a really bad problem. It was a huge problem last year, and
It's been a
they
problem for the
addressed it.
last 5 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Part of that is because they have taken linemen. Steelers have taken linemen later in the draft instead of prioritizing them early on.
mhm.
Like I even remember when they took Pat Fryermuth a few years ago in the second round. I texted some friends. I'm like, I'm now getting very concerned of who's blocking for everybody. um, Not concerned about that anymore. I also want to put on record I liked your guys' draft as well. It was a solid draft for like again the last few years where you haven't had number one overall picks. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was great. We got some needs too. It's just it's hard. It As a fan of the draft, it's hard to like be excited when like you're not doing anything until the middle of the second night. Like it's just like, what are we doing?
oh yeah, oh absolutely, yeah. That is kind of brutal. I felt that. I have felt that once in my life, and that was when we got Minkah Fitzpatrick because of the year Ben went down.
Yeah.
Like Steelers didn't have a number one overall pick, and I'm like, well, this is really boring. That's hard for me to be excited. But any other thoughts on the draft?
Um. Yeah. I mean, we'll I guess circle back, or I'll finish up just talking about my later round guys too.
Sure.
The Browns took wide receiver Jamari Thrash out of Louisville. Nathaniel Watts, linebacker from Mississippi State, Miles Harden, cornerback from South Dakota, and Jawan Briggs, defensive tackle from Cincinnati. So, what I find very interesting is that the Browns seemingly love like defensive guys from Mississippi State for some reason that
Yeah,
they have an eye on Mississippi State because they got MJ Emerson, who's a really good corner. Like they got him in the third round. He's been terrific for being a third round kind of flyer type of dude. And he's been probably the second best corner behind Denzel Ward for a lot of the last 2 years. So he's been pretty good. Nathaniel Watson seemingly shows a lot of good flashes that he could be a really good depth piece on that. So um, we'll see. We'll see.
what do you give? I give the Steelers draft an A to an A plus. What do you give grade to the Browns?
um, I mean, I mean, I'd give them a, like a B for not having a first round pick. But yeah, I mean, I think all in all, if I were just to grade the first two picks, I'd give that an A, definitely. Just because their biggest needs were defensive tackle and guard, and they addressed that as
There you
soon as
go.
they could. So I'd give it maybe A minus, B plus,
Mm,
somewhere in there. Just because I mean most of their draft class is in the fifth round or later, so it's just so hard to even grade that
right.
on what that is really warranting.
Gotcha. So that was that. We addressed the NFL draft a little later than we definitely would want to have. Uh, to be honest with you, I completely forget what you had on our agenda for what was next today.
I mean, I just had the NBA playoffs.
All
We
right,
can move into that.
we sure can.
Um,
Now I gotta open this up by saying a thing. Casen and I send each other a lot of TikToks back and forth. You're pretty much the only friend I send a lot of TikToks to directly on TikTok. I'm constantly taking that while I can, right? At least while we still have TikTok, but I digress. Um, there is an animation, I think it's called like Too Tall Animation, that has
mhm.
this series where every time the NBA playoffs roll around, they essentially make caricatures of all of the star players representing each team, and it's like they're the Peanuts. It's like, Charlie Brown and squad, and they have them all the matchups, and at the end of every series, there's some sort of cartoonish thing that happens that they show how one team beat the other. And then at the end of the playoffs, they do this mass mashup of like all of them. It is one of my new favorite things, like in all of sports media. I love it. I love the series. They put it on Instagram too, so you can go find it. I will double check while we're talking of exactly what it's called. But I've been sending you all of those.
Oh
And
yeah.
and one of my absolute favorite by far is Donovan Mitchell just coming down looking like a spider and then just wrapping them up. And it's like Cavs win. And it's like that's pretty cool. Um, I guess I'll dive right into this. Cavs Magic was the only series so far to go to 7 games so far this year in the first round.
Yeah. That was definitely not stressful at all and not infuriating at all.
I'll go ahead and just run through it real quick. Celtics dispatched the Heat in 5 games. Pacers dispatched the Bucks in 6. Knicks beat the 76ers in 6 as well. That was the East. On the West, the Thunder swept the Pelicans. Figured that was going to happen. Mavericks won in 6 over the Clippers. The red hot Timberwolves swept the Suns, putting that squad in disarray, quite frankly. And the Nuggets, gentlemen, swept the Lakers. Definitely, I thought that was going to be a sweep. So it wasn't. So I guess props to the Lakers for getting one. That's where we sit right now. That was the first round. Just wanted to run through all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that the it was a lot of what we figured for most of the first round. We figured that the Celtics, the 1 seed, they got a pretty I think beat it because I don't know if Jimmy played at all in that series. I know he was injured.
He's banged up.
So yeah, the Heat weren't quite what they could have been, and so that one wasn't quite as back and forth. I would say, at least in the East side, the most surprising outcome of just sort of how uncompetitive it was the Bucks Pacers.
Yeah,
Um,
that was a surprise.
well, Giannis got injured and then Dame got injured, and then it was essentially just Pat Bev versus everybody.
Yes.
And
it is too tall animation, by the way. Too tall.
Yes.
Too tall animation. Anyway, go ahead.
And so I was just a little surprised that the Pacers kind of walked away with that so easily. I knew it would be I knew with Giannis out, it wouldn't have been quite, the Bucks winning. The Bucks definitely were in trouble with Giannis out, but it didn't seem like they had any chance even without him. So
no, even the fact that they pushed it to 6, I thought that was interesting. It has set up what I honestly think is going to be a pretty uncompetitive series. I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks sweep them, to be completely honest. At least that's the way I'd be leaning right now. The Knicks are genuinely good, like really good.
mm-hmm.
It sets up quite an interesting situation there, regardless of who they play in the next round, because I absolutely think the Cavs can cool off the Celtics a bit. Any thoughts on that? 2 games in, it's 1-1.
So I guess I'll go through where we stand now.
Yeah.
Celtics Cavs is tied 1-1. Game 3 is on Saturday. And then the Pacers Knicks, it is Knicks 2-0. And that is going to be happening here in a couple hours tonight after we're recording.
We won't get into the prediction aspect of it since Saturday is when you'll hear this. Yeah.
And then on the West, Thunder Mavs is tied 1-1. And then Timberwolves and Nuggets. Timberwolves are leading 2-0, which that is, I think, the biggest story so far.
I'm going to say something that has been a theme, I think, of this whole NBA season, but especially these last few weeks. I'm going to say something that I don't think is debatable at this point. The LeBron Steph era is over, correct? That's been like the biggest theme of this year. I think that's fair to say.
I mean, honestly, the LeBron, Steph, KD era. I mean, KD's done. I mean, everybody that we've been watching to watch in the playoffs for the last 10 years isn't in it anymore.
Correct.
Like
I thought, and we're in between eras. I really think that in a lot of ways, both the NHL and NBA are in between eras right now, in terms of the greats aging out, right? And we'll get to the NHL. There's obviously an emerging absolute superstar in Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards, who has been incredible all year, including putting together probably the best highlight reel overall of anyone in the season. In a lot of ways, I feel like the T-Wolves have fully arrived. If you recall, at one point, they were thinking about maybe Karl Anthony Towns will get traded. Maybe they didn't necessarily know whether they were in blow-it-up mode. But, I mean, they are a wagon right now. I mean, they're undefeated in the playoffs right now. I really think, like, where I'm going with this is when 2021 happened, I thought and I swore that we were about to see Giannis for the next 5-10 years. We're entering the Giannis era, right? I'm not necessarily sitting here saying that we couldn't necessarily, but since then we've obviously had Nikola Jokic last year. Nuggets looked really good, and now we have another team that looks like they could at least beat them in the series, maybe not sweep them. What I'm saying is, there's never been a better time for parity in the NBA, at least in the last 10 years since LeBron arrived. Since this happens, and this has been very fun to see because I think we're in between eras. Do I think one will emerge again? Yes, that's just what happens in the NBA. But who knows? Maybe we could be seeing the emergence of the T Wolves era.
Yeah,
It's a
I mean,
terrifying thought. But I mean,
yeah, I going back to what you said, I
yeah,
think it is kind of crazy that um since the Bucks won their championship, was it in 20, was it in 21, that
2021. Yep.
they haven't really been close since. They've gotten bounced, like they haven't really, they've gotten in, there's been injuries. And I I think it just comes down to the Bucks is just a really dysfunctional franchise, which we talked about it
Yeah,
earlier when they fired their coach mid-season to hire Doc Rivers, and Doc Rivers was making excuses immediately about why they weren't good,
we did talk about
and
that. Yeah.
that went about as well as we thought it would. Um, so yeah, it definitely very interesting. Um, I think Anthony Edwards is absolutely a huge superstar in the making. He's who the Timberwolves thought Andrew Wiggins was going to be,
Yes.
and because the pairing with Cat actually works now. Was that you have Karl Anthony Towns with Gobert, and I think Karl Anthony Towns. My issue with Karl Anthony Towns, the whole, like, ever since he's been in the league, was that he was always too soft of a player to be a center. Like, as a center, he was just always way too soft defensively. And that kind of gets hidden in the fact when you have Gobert, defensive player of the year, like, also beside you,
Yeah.
kind of also manning center, power forward, kind of. I think they kind of switch sometimes, but
Mm.
um
They
so
always
when
struck.
you got
They were always a team that struck you as like, how are the T Wolves not better?
right,
Like,
exactly. Is
like,
that back like 5 years ago when it was like Wiggins and Cat,
yeah.
and it was kind of like, what? How were they net? Like, they
How are
were
this? How is this team
never
not
making the
contending?
playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like,
was like, how are they just not even remotely good? And then finally they traded to get Gobert. They got Ant, and then they managed to get the pieces. And it seems like they finally have a good coach that understands,
yeah.
how to get the best out of them.
True.
And then something needs to be addressed too, is that the general manager for the Timberwolves came from the Nuggets. And so he built the Timberwolves to be the Jokic slayers.
Mm.
He built them to be
How
able to
long has he
stop them.
been? How long has he been there?
Uh 2 years.
Interesting.
2 years.
So 2 years long enough to, yes, have built the nucleus that won the title last year. Uh, like
Yeah.
handily. Like the Nuggets were very much the best team last year.
He was the president of basketball operations from June 2013 till May 22.
Gotcha. So man, when you're good, you're good. I mean, and now you've got them in a situation where they look like the better team. Jokic Slayers is a good way to put it. They look like the better team than the Nuggets.
I
I mean,
Yeah, not only are they up 2-0, they have made them look lost.
yeah, I mean
They them
they went into Denver and made them look bad, right? So
yeah.
I mean, it's been in ways that we haven't seen. But again, it's sort of like the Nuggets have only been what we know them as the Nuggets for 1 year, right? Again, I go back to kind of the parody thing. It's like, as good as they were last year, that's all fresh in our minds. So it's like, oh wow, this really is Ant-Man's this is Towns and Ant-Man's time to shine. I think it's also poignant that they just completely destroyed the Suns. I mean,
Hmm.
like, and threw them into complete disarray. I mean, if you're a Suns fan, you got to just be. I mean, I feel bad for those fans, like, genuinely. Um, just how they restructured and how they loaded up around Devin Booker, and it just, yeah, and then you just get smacked by the T-Wolves. So
So
yeah,
not only that, I'm trying to verify this too.
mm,
So not only is their general manager, the former the former exec from the Nuggets. the Chris Finch, the head coach of the Timberwolves, was an assistant in Denver
Oh,
for
okay,
a number of years.
cool.
Um, so yeah, so
So
that
they
that
so
that
so then
definitely, I
so
think,
they really they know the West too. That's the other thing. Like they know these
yeah.
teams, so it's not surprising that we're in the situation that we're
So
at.
Chris Finch worked for Michael Malone for 3
Mm,
years, and it's definitely like he knows Malone a lot,
yeah,
and so he knows what he's going to be able to do to stop him and counter what he's going to counter, and yeah, so
yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like when you really know a team super well, like you can definitely overcome them. So I mean, keep an eye on that. I mean, because the Timberwolves were built to do one thing, and so we'll see how they fare if they can hold off and beat the Nuggets. They're gonna have to play the Thunder or Mavs, and so we're gonna have to see how they go up against them because the Thunder are another animal.
Thunder are very, very good. Yes, what like SGA has very much arrived, and they have completely kind of moved totally past the exodus of the long since defunct Harden KD years, just moved out of that shadow of that era. They were great all year. They were,
Mhm.
they're the number one overall seed for a reason. If there's one, if there's anyone who can do it though, it's Luka, right? There that series is tied at 1-1, as you said. Uh I want to say I really could see that going either way, but I think the Thunder are gonna win that in like 6. Uh Seems like a
Okay.
healthy number. Which puts the Thunder against, if I'm picking it right
Yeah, I
now,
would.
the T Wolves.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think it'll be Thunder Timberwolves in the Western Finals. So I think that would be a fun series. I want to see that series so bad.
I also think
I
that
mean,
the team in the West is winning it again this year. Whoever emerges from this gauntlet
yeah,
wins.
I
I don't think
I
any of
would
those teams in the East are winning
love
it.
I would love to see a Timberwolves title. That would be really fun. For the people of Minnesota
Yeah,
and Minneapolis as a whole, I think that'd be super cool.
would be cool. A place that hasn't won a whole lot. How do you see the East going? I mean, these are the teams who play your squad a lot.
Yeah, so
Um,
I mean, we can go back. Obviously, I think definitely the Knicks are gonna quickly route the Pacers, and so that's gonna go.
yep.
I don't know.
Brunson and the
I mean,
boys.
the Cavs are just such an infuriating team because they so we're talking on Friday. Last night they beat Boston in Boston, and they routed them. I mean, at the end of it, and
It
so
was eye opening.
that is them playing their brand of basketball to the best of their ability. But the problem is we don't know what we're getting night in and night out. You don't know what team you're getting, and that's been sort of the biggest issue with JB Bickerstaff is like they win a ton of games and then the team forgets how to play basketball for a week and he's about to get fired. Like because people were about to run him out of town Sunday if he didn't beat the Magic. And so here we are beating the Celtics in Boston, game 2.
Here's my thing. Here's my thing on this era of the Celtics. If you show a bit of gusto, you can smack this team. They're this Jason Tatum era Celtics team has been an underachieving,
Mhm.
fan infuriating. I think every Celtics fan would say the exact same thing you just said about their team. Because when they look bad, they look really bad.
Yeah.
And they go into a shell. And I really, really believe it when I say the Cavs can string together some games here. Look for this to go 7 games, and I think the
It
Cavs can beat them.
if the Cavs can do what they did last night in the 2 games in Cleveland and go back to Boston up 3-1, I think they're in much better shape.
If we're
And
sitting here
so
2-2 here in the next few days, I really do believe I'm like, okay, Cavs can win this. Like, just because the
yeah.
Celtics are such an intimidatable team. I mean, they get so
Yeah.
soft at times.
I
And
don't know. I don't know the timeline on Porzingis. They look like they missed Porzingis too.
they do.
Definitely. I think yeah, it's also going back to the LeBron Cavs too. The Cleveland Boston has been a thing for the last decade, and so it's definitely super interesting
Who are you
to see
predicting?
that.
Who goes?
just for the fun of it, I'll say Cleveland.
Cleveland and Knicks. I'm going to call it too. Why not? When the
Which
yes, Knicks.
so here's the thing. Here's the a little bit of fun trivia for you. Um, Cleveland, basically Cleveland threw their last they threw their last game of the season to be the 4 seed to play the Magic. And so the one of the biggest things that was all over the Cleveland radio the last week or the last 2 weeks was they threw the last game of the season to be the 4 seed to get the easy matchup against the Magic, but the Magic took them to 7. And so people were like, if you basically lost to face this team and you lose to them, like what that is a terrible like that is just awful. And so they barely skated out of that matchup, but they did that so they could avoid the Knicks in the second round
Hmm.
because they would have rather played Boston than the Knicks because the Knicks is a really bad matchup. I
Yeah.
mean it just is. Like I don't Tibbs Tibbs can be a good coach. The Knicks are kind of a good roster. I don't think they're like a finals worthy team. Like if we're sitting here, the Cavs somehow beat the Celtics, and so it's Cavs Knicks in the Eastern Finals, and then the Knicks just annihilate the Cavs. The Knicks are gonna get swept in the finals because
I
the
was going
Knicks
to
are
say
not.
the Knicks are going to get run over by any of those teams.
Yeah, like the Knicks are not a finals worthy team, but they've just gotten lucky matchups so far. And it's just it that yeah, so it's going to end up being ugly, I think, if they somehow luck their way into a finals run.
As a Bulls fan, I'll say that that's why I really just want some random player to somehow enter the Bulls organization that can somehow just get them over the finish line into the playoffs. Because I'm like, man, the East is so bad right now that anything could happen. Like none of these teams are very intimidating to me. I'm like, can we at least get in there somehow so we can have like so I can have rooting interest in the NBA playoffs more
Right.
than I already do? Because in a lot of ways, as we talked, at least since we started our show here, the NBA's playoffs have been incredibly fun. So, and
I
I
mean,
still think that.
look, I'd love to see the Bulls in the playoffs. Get the Magic out of here. I don't care
Yeah,
about the
yeah, Bulls
Magic.
instead of the Magic. But hey, the play-in tournament exists, so it's possible someday. Um, so yeah, cool. We'll see how it unfolds. See what we're talking about a week from now. But I personally want to see another Spider. Another. They're clearly going with the Spider thing. Is that a nickname of Donovan Mitchell's? I'm like,
Yes, Spider. Yeah,
that's what
Spider.
I thought. I figured
Yeah,
that was me being stupid. I was like, oh yeah, wait, that is a thing. That is a thing.
his logo is like a yeah, it's like a
That's
spider.
that's cool. So yeah, I want to see more of that happen through Too Tall Animation. And seriously, go check that out. Too Tall Animation on Instagram or TikTok. Um, yeah. So is it time to go to the ice, Casen?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Mm.
I don't really want to, but I'm gonna have to address it at some point.
Well, we'll go ahead and get into it. I'll start on the West. Dallas dispatched your reigning champion, Vegas Golden Knights, in seven
Yeah.
games and moved on. Avalanche took care of Winnipeg. Vancouver Canucks, probably one of the bigger surprises of the year, dispatched the Predators. Figured that would happen. Uh, Connor McDavid and the Oilers took care of the Kings. Moved on. That's where things sit right now. Dallas, Colorado, Vancouver, and Edmonton. Moving over to the East, Florida Panthers took care of the Lightning, their cross-state rivals. Boston beat Toronto hilariously in 7 games. Hilarious because, sorry, Leafs fans, things just don't work out for you. It's always just you're always on the back end of that. But anyway, hang on a second. Good. Uh, New York Rangers, hottest team in hockey, hottest team in the playoffs, swept the Caps like they weren't even there. And then you had the Carolina Hurricanes defeating the Islanders, who really battled their way into the postseason. So I was a little bit bummed to see that. But regardless, setting up Rangers, Hurricanes on one side, and Florida and Boston on the other side. Kason, why don't you say where all of the where they all sit right now, since you did that for NBA?
Yeah, so moving over back over to the West, Dallas and Colorado is 1-1 as of now. And then probably a bit surprisingly, for at least what we would think going into the season. Vancouver, Edmonton is 1-0.
Mhm.
So we'll see how that transpires moving forward. Then moving over to the East, we've got the Panthers, Bruins, tied 1-1, and then Rangers, Hurricanes, 3-0 Rangers. So
Yes.
Rangers are on their way to a sweep or, gentleman's sweep, but probably well on their way to a Eastern Finals appearance.
Why don't you discuss anything at all that stood out to you about the Vegas series? Because I'll be honest, I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of the first round, and a lot of the times, I'll just be honest, I don't see a lot of the West first round because of the way my schedule is, and it's always kind of busy, and those games start so late. Uh, Whereas I know you're obviously a fan of the Vegas Golden Knights, the defending champs. So I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this one was weird. You had I'm yeah, you had Vegas go up 2-0, and then Dallas came back and tied it 2-2. And then, Dallas went up 3-2, and then Vegas tied it in game 6 to go 3-3, and then
Mm-hmm.
um game 7 was just sleepy, and the offense didn't come to play in game 7.
Let me make it very clear that I think that a lot of the gusto and allure of the Vegas Golden Knights last year, I mean, they really were so dominant last year that it's really, really hard to repeat. And they ran into a team in
Yeah.
Dallas who genuinely I think is probably the best team top to bottom in the West. I actually kind of thought that last year, going into last year's Stanley Cup playoffs. Therefore, I wouldn't be surprised if they go all the way because they dispatch the winners. Sorry.
No, yeah,
Okay.
I think that definitely I I don't necessarily care as much as I would have about the way this season ended, because it felt sort of the whole season that it was a bit of a hangover season from the cup run.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. It's incredibly hard to, repeat
In any sport, let
in
alone
any
Stanley Cup.
sport. It's incredibly hard to keep to keep a squad together and together mentally for 2 years in a row,
Yeah.
to be able to, like, actually get deep into the playoffs, several times. Um,
The further I become removed from the 16-17 run that the Penguins put together at the back end of my college years, the more especially as we've started to decline, the more it really makes me really happy that I enjoyed that as much as I did at the time because of how difficult that is. Respect to the Lightning, who also did it in that amount of time
mhm.
since then. But seeing a team as dominant as you all were last year, there's so many things that have to come together for that to happen even once, let alone 2 years in a row. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, that's why the aspect of that ever happening 3 times in a row is just insane, especially in today's salary cap era. So I didn't want you to talk your lid off all about it, or I didn't say it to poke fun. I just really wanted to kind of hear your take on that more than anything else.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it is what it is. The Stars, we struggled with them for a lot of the season anyway. And I wasn't expecting. I was hoping to, at least win a round, but the I didn't. So it was a little unfortunate to get, bounced. But it is what it is. At least we won one. So
I want to get into this and talk about one team in particular because there's one team that is similar to the T Wolves right now in terms of how well they are playing. I've gotten to watch them a few times, and it looks like they're a team that's finally arriving a year later than I think they anticipated. The Rangers are incredible right now. I've gotten a chance to watch them a lot, and the way Artemi Panarin is playing with Lafreniere, I believe is how you say his name, uh, and Kopakako, really, they obviously have been building and building since that draft and all that stuff, and obviously behind the great play of Shesterkin. I really like the first round was the first round. I mean, they are dismantling a very, very good Carolina Hurricanes team that was given a shot in the arm by a Penguins draft, sending Gensel there, Jake Gensel, who looked great in the first round, and he's actually looked pretty great in this round too. It's just they're running into the Rangers, who I did watch a decent amount of that last night, and last night being a Thursday night. If you don't know how the Rangers won, Rangers tied the game at 2 with a minute and like 18 seconds left, and then they won 2 minutes into overtime. So it was like one of those game 3 back-breaking series, or game series wins. Like it was one of those like they're looking completely up at like truly a better team even at home come game 4, which is why I think the Rangers are going to sweep them. They're reminding me of like the 2011 Kings, who were sitting there 8-0 at the end of the first 2 rounds, and it's like, okay, who's going to beat them, let alone contend them in the series? They're looking amazing. If you get a chance to watch them, watch them. And I say that as someone who does not like the Rangers, but it's like the trades they made at the deadline last year. They anticipated that was going to happen. The guys who they already had in the system, in the team, are just cohesively better this year, built more for a playoff run.
I know they've been adding a lot of pieces because they got Panarin several years ago
Yep.
from Columbus, and then they took Lafreniere several years ago, at least 2 or 3 years ago.
They've had
And
him.
so he's finally rounding into form. Yeah, I think definitely it felt like the Rangers thought that this year was going to be last year,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason they just weren't that good last year.
Right. And hockey's one of those situations where it doesn't really necessarily always work that those deadline guys pan out. In the times that we've seen it happen, it really hasn't happened. Really, it doesn't happen to the extent of hockey. Baseball is the best for that. You can just inject an incredible starting pitcher into an already good team and ride that all the way to the World Series. Hockey, there's only one puck. You got to have the lines have to have chemistry. It's easier to do that from the off season into the season rather than at the deadline on, right? You don't typically see the teams making that splash move. And we talked about that a year ago. You don't usually see that team get in there. Just because you got Patrick Kane doesn't mean you guys are now unbeatable. They were good, but they weren't this good even. So hockey I don't think hockey really lends itself to be like that, to be completely honest.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say, I mean, I just for the sake of, I think the sport, I would love to see the Rangers go and win. I mean, I think it'd be a great story. I think it's, they haven't won, in a while. So,
Do you know the last time the Rangers won the Stanley Cup?
what was that 2010?
No. If I'm not
Or
mistaken,
they in it, they lose that one?
they lost that one because they played against the Kings and they lost in 5. I'm making a point here. They've been in it, don't get me wrong, but the last time they actually won it, I'm talking because I'm stalling. There we go. Yes. The last time they were in it was 13-14 was the last time they were in it. The last time they won it, I'm going somewhere with this, is distinct because their actual parade was overshadowed by the Bronco chase.
Oh
June
yeah,
17th,
yeah.
1994. It was one of the events, if you've ever seen that 30 for 30, was going on that day that was completely overshadowed by a certain Bronco chase. So it was
So
1994 was the last time the Rangers won the Stanley Cup.
I think it's only poetic then that they win this year to
Oh yeah. So it is. Yeah, it's only poetic that they win it this year. Yeah, which would be 30 years later. It's 30 years. So, yeah, it's
I
also
mean for
on a totally different
hmm,
like humorous setup though. Away from the humor of what you just said. Uh, I was born in '94, so it's been my
hmm,
whole life since they last won it.
hmm.
So not since
I
they've been
mean
close. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I would just say it would be very, I mean, as insufferable as they would be, it would be very funny to see the Knicks and Rangers in the finals at the same time.
No, it
And
wouldn't.
then
No,
the
no,
Knicks get swept and the Rangers sweep. The Knicks just bomb out, the Rangers just dominate.
I will say, in a city that has really not won a lot of championships in our lifetime beyond the Yankees and Giants, right? They've won a decent amount, a lot if you count the Yankees, but not everyone in New York roots for the Yankees,
Well,
right?
either way, all New York sports have been pretty bad for the last 10 years, 10,
Collectively,
15 years.
the Knicks have been bad our whole lives outside
Since
of
since
a
yeah.
month with Jeremy Lin, and so and Stoudemire kind of, and so them being in at the same time would be nuts, mainly because they both share Madison Square. They share Madison Square Garden, right?
Mhm.
Um, that would become nuts, and also because I would imagine the overlap of their fans is a lot. Knicks
Oh,
and
yeah.
Rangers specifically among
Yeah.
New York teams. I say that because I know some folks in my circle down here. One is a huge Yankees and like Jets fan. One is a huge Rangers and Mets fan. So it just showing you that it's not necessarily universal that people root for different. Even though New York has two of every team, right?
Mhm.
Uh, it's not universal that all of them root for one set in New York. So, yeah, that's a very astute of you. The spectacle of that here, especially as we get into June, would be pretty nuts if that happens. Like if they're both just playing at all, like even the conference finals would be crazy.
Right.
Uh, so anyway, that being said, I am expecting that to happen. I'm expecting a sweep at least to happen in that series. Boston's still just doing their thing. Hosta's playing incredible. Uh, am I convinced that? I mean, am I convinced they'll beat Florida? I mean, between Chuck and the guys, Florida's still really good. So if you
Mhm.
told me that they beat them, I'd be like, yeah, I see that. Uh, I can see this being a very, very fun year for the actual final, is where I'm going. Because to be completely honest with you, if there's one matchup I want to see, it's this young Vancouver squad making it, or finally the arrival of McDavid against like the Rangers would be an amazing thing for hockey. I just think that some sort of emergence of these young superstars. Again, the NHL is in between an era. We're well past the Crosby and Ovi era. Like we're out of that. That's the era that the
Mhm.
NHL is moving out of. Um, and it would be cool to see one of these teams kind of take over as the new. Oh, this could be our era now. A little harder to do in terms of dynasties in the NHL, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think
I thought Cale Makar had a
the
chance to do it with that. I mean, I think he's doing it with the Avs, but they haven't made it back.
right.
Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say we talked about the Rangers, but yeah, I mean the Avs are still there. I mean, nobody's really running away with the West, so the Avs could definitely still make it back. I
yep.
mean, there's no reason they couldn't if they win their game. So it'd be yeah. I mean the Avs I think are definitely probably the class of the West for the foreseeable future as far as reliably always in contention.
And
Um,
I've been wanting McDavid to make it to at least the finals
yeah,
for as long as he's played hockey. So
yeah.
I love Connor
I
McDavid.
mean, it
So
would yeah, it would be great to see him, make it far, but
what do you think's going to happen, Casen? Who's going to the East?
um, yeah, that's just so tough. I think I'm gonna have to say
This is throwing a dart at a board, man. This is
I'm gonna
real
have to just
competitive.
say Stars Rangers, and Rangers over Stars.
Oh, you're just jumping straight to the
Yeah.
Stars, Rangers, and Rangers over the Stars. Okay, I see that. I got Rangers also. I'm gonna go. Oh man, that's really good, Kaysen. That's like the quintessential pick. But I'll throw out a limb and I'll go Vancouver Rangers. Maybe something crazy happens and we get a part. I really want whoever
Yeah.
comes out of that Vancouver Edmonton series to make it because having another Canadian team in the final is always bananas when that happens.
Hmm.
Just because those fans are the best in the world. So yeah, I want that to happen. I'll go back up. I'll go Oilers, Rangers, Rangers win. Now,
Mm.
do the Rangers lose a game? That's a real question I have. I think that's a valid question right now.
Yeah, I think they lose a game. Yeah, I think they will lose at least a game
In the Eastern Conference Finals
against Florida or
or
Boston. Yeah.
Boston. I agree. If it's Boston for sure. I actually think
Yeah.
that would be really fun to see a Boston Rangers Eastern Conference Final just because again, two original six teams,
Hmm.
two of the oldest teams in American professional sports, literally. Uh, against on the other side, you got young superstars against newer franchises, minus like really Edmonton and Vancouver, but you get what I mean. So here's hoping that happens. Long live hockey. And this time of
Yeah.
year. It's always a fun time of year whenever you got the hardwood and the ice going on at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other thoughts? Or are we moving on to the final topics here?
Yeah, we can move on. Mhm.
Okay. Before I get into Fallout, because I want to end the show with that discussion, I want to go ahead and acknowledge that we're not doing an of the week segment this week because we figured out we have enough stuff to talk about. But one of my of the weeks that it's not an official of the weeks, is a call up of the week, Paul Skeens. That's why I wore this hat today. The number one pitching prospect, quite literally in all of Major League Baseball, is coming up, and he's going to start for the Pirates. I'm going to go ahead and say today, Saturday, when you're hearing this against the Cubs, and not a moment too soon. The Pirates are 17-21, hovering just under 500, but they're third in the division. We're above the Reds and the Cardinals, very much like our man James said would happen with the Brewers and Cubs up there at the top. So this is a big series. He's a there was the stuff about him and Livy Dunn. What's funny, Casen, is on our last show, I think you pointed out that like the Pirates were waiting for Livy Dunn to be done like at college at LSU beforehand. That's almost quite literally to the day of what happened. So I said at the time, I'm like, come on, there's no way
well,
that's
she's in
ridiculous.
Pittsburgh, so they made sure she could come.
They absolutely did that, and it's funny because if say this wasn't happening for another couple of weeks, I'd be like, okay, so they weren't waiting. The fact that they're doing it immediately, like come May, it's like, oh, okay, so we've seen enough of him in AAA. He's like almost no hitting teams, so it's like, okay, I guess we'll do this. So I'm excited. The Pirates are really struggling on offense, ironically, right now. Hey, you can never have enough starting pitching. I hope he's really good at pitching a baseball. He seems to be, and at the major league level. Um, I will say there hasn't been this amount of attention like being paid to a Pirates prospect literally in my life. Maybe McCutchen, kind of, but even like then, people didn't think McCutchen was going to be like quite the superstar that he's become. Like this has been from the moment he arrived and like in the system, like, oh no, this guy's like the next Randy Johnson. Like so I'm excited. I'm excited.
Well, I hope for your case and in the sake of the franchise that he's everything that you guys think he can be, because then that'll help you get free agents. That'll help you get people wanting to come play for a team that has a guy like that.
Right. And let's just be honest. I'm going to address this elephant in the room too. I saw someone make a joke that was like breaking. The Pirates are promoting Paul Skeens directly to the Yankees, and I was like, okay, that's hilarious. That's actually real funny. Um, but it's true. Like it's been known. Like that's literally like his track so far is exactly what happened with Garrett Cole, and I am. Do I think that he'll eventually like do better in another uniform? I mean, I don't know. I think the Pirates have shown in the last couple of years that they're absolutely willing to spend money on guys that are good enough. They've done it the last few years with Key Bryan and Brian Reynolds last year. I don't necessarily think this is that same era. I think this new GM has got players around him that are going to be better sooner. No knock to previous GM Neil Huntington, but yeah, I really think that think something special is brewing here, and I think even if you get 5, 6, 7 great years out of him in a rookie contract, if all those guys are arcing in that way to be good in the next 2, 3 years, I really think that he could even if he does go somewhere else someday, be part of something really special in Pittsburgh. So the timing's really good. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
the nucleus is already pretty good at the Pirates level with their prospects, and now you got Skeens coming in, so it's like this could all be building towards a mecca. I only had one other like of the week, and I'm not going to go into it at all. Um, how do I put this? Well, it's not even really an of the week. Beef of the week goes to Drake and Kendrick. Okay, that's it. That's it. That's as far
Yeah.
as we're going with that whole conversation. What?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the only other topic I wanted to bring up
Yeah.
today before we get into Fallout is the I guess little information drop that happened this afternoon that we talked about
Yes. On
We
positive
got
notes, we talk about positive
yeah.
things.
So we got an actual cover of the deluxe edition of EA College Football 25.
We did.
So we so they there has been a rumor out there that there's going to be three different regional covers, and so we got which EA uploaded to the Sony PlayStation Store is the deluxe edition, and so it has the right in the foreground Quinn Ewers, Donovan Edwards, and Travis Hunter, which presumably those will be the three different regional covers because you got the South covered with Texas, you got sort of the Midwest and probably the Northeast covered with Michigan, and then the West covered with Travis Hunter in Colorado. So uh, we got that, and then we got a little screenshot of just sort of the graphics of Notre Dame, and so we got to see how cool their gold helmets look with they got the lighting, reflecting off the helmets. That looks super cool. So we got that little piece of information, and then there's a timer on EA's website that counts
Yeah.
down to the official announcement of the covers and the actual release date, which is coming, I believe, Thursday at 11. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that.
It's
Because
happening, Casen.
it's happening.
It's
It is
happening.
happening.
It's actually happening. Not that I
I
didn't
don't know
think it was
how we've
happening.
had so many conversations since we've known each other about can this game ever come back? And we're almost there. We almost have it in our hands.
Like, it's not even an exaggeration. Since we've known each other, we've been talking about, man, it'd be awesome if the NCAA games would come back. And I remember even our older friends in college talking about, like, those of us who remember it much younger. And then I think you revealed that you never actually played it, and it makes sense. I mean, you're like a couple years younger than me, and
Mhm.
there's a whole 10 to 11 year gap we've had here. I had friends even younger that didn't even realize that those existed. Like, wait, there was an NCAA game that was like Madden. Yes, and it was better than Madden. It existed. So, yeah, it's like happening. Like, there's still part of me that's gonna be like, until I'm actually playing the game, I can't believe it's happening. Uh, Also, it's like a meme at this point,
Mhm.
if I'm being honest. So I kind of love the idea of, like, oh wow, it's actually happening. And every little piece of news is another wavelength of drop. Don't know necessarily when our next show's coming out next week, but that info drop is what, next Thursday?
Yeah, yeah.
So we might have some stuff to talk about. Um, yeah, shout out EA Sports. Really didn't think this would happen like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Even 3 years ago, I was like, we're never going to get that. Even with NIL, we're not getting that. Yep, looks like we are. Fallout. I wanted to get into this, and I would have wanted to address this earlier than now. We're shifting to our pop culture half to close the show. Uh, the Fallout show, if you have not seen it, based on the very popular video game series, is on Amazon Prime, and go check it out right now. I will say it is TVMA, so definitely an adult show, mainly just because of how gritty it is, but also a lot of the story elements are very adult in the sense of you would need to be an adult to understand really what's going on. But at a very basic sense, it's based on a game series. It's my favorite video game series of all time. I've played basically all the games multiple times. It was one of the ones I grew up playing, really high school on, and a lot of my friends did as well. It's kind of taken the world by storm in a way that I didn't realize. Like, a lot of people, their first introduction to the whole universe is this show. And Bethesda Game Studios, who makes the games, if you're not familiar, all but first two, and then they steward over that one, and then they had a an Obsidian made the New Vegas game and everything like that. I mean, they've been putting out stuff, like, so many people have been in flux and playing these games for the first time. If you're not familiar with it, you make your protagonist and you go through a story. It is a open world game. There are really, really profound stories, usually personal to your character. You make yourself or make your character look however you want. It's a role playing game, and a story unfolds. Every story is individual. The games are linked, but they're really not. They're all location based. Like, Fallout 3 happens in um, Washington D.C. Fallout 4 takes place in Boston 10 years later. Uh, Fallout 1, which I did play on the PC, takes place in West Coast. This show takes place on the West Coast. And it's also, I'm not going to go through all the lore here, but I never really thought this was going to be this good. Like, it takes me back to like a year or so ago when The Last of Us came out, and it was like Casen, we kind of talked about it. Like it kind of put that world in the showcase. And according to Bethesda Game Studios, because Todd Howard is an executive producer, he's the main creative lead at Bethesda Game Studios, is one of the three main executive producers of this show. It's canon to the show and the events of the show, and in the games, I should say. And it's the New York Times and everybody's writing about it. It's got like a 90 something on Rotten Tomatoes, an 86% like audience score. You've watched a little bit of it. Any thoughts of what you've seen?
Yeah. Um, I never, really played the games that much. Like I was aware of them. I remember I mean, I think it was a time thing too of like I just never it was never, I think I was because I'm a little younger than you and I just missed the boat on it. But I remember my older brothers playing New Vegas a lot. But yeah, I thought that the show is done very well. I mean, it looks it's seemingly a very well produced show. It's the story so far from what I've seen is very interesting. Um, and it's definitely dark.
It is, and
Um,
it is a violent show. I want to make sure I put that out there. And it's not for violence sake. It's like a realistic take on a post nuclear apocalypse would probably be like for those left
mhm.
around. It would be a brutal situation. Um,
It's also just I mean the concept of of I guess the concept of like Vault Tech as a company or whatever is dark and like in a
yes, and to quickly explain what Vault Tech is, all the Fallout games you basically begin in a vault. Vault Tech is a fictional company in the game. They sell the premise of, and none of this is spoiler ish. They sell, and you pick this up pretty quick in the show. They pre-war they sold the premise that it was they were all shelters for when the bombs dropped. Right, this takes place in an alternate reality when there's the nuclear threats never went
Mhm.
away. Right,
Yeah.
uh,
So
and
Vault Tech built and sold
Vault Tech
spots in all
is
these vaults.
soling spots to all these vaults, and they're doing it. And then over the course of the games, and well, really early on in the show, it's kind of revealed that like each vault is an experiment, and some were experimental, some were not. But a lot of the intrigue of the show is what's going on here. And I can tell you that when you come across a vault in a game, it's a really big deal because there's a natural inclination of, okay, what went on in here? You know what I mean? Like, what was the
Hmm.
experiment? Some of them are really, really freaky and scary, but
Hmm.
also some of the most memorable in all of video games, right? Memorable locations. Some of them have to do with your story, right? And that's basically the case with all of them. But very vault centric, and so the fact that you start, it revolves around three main characters, I will say, and I love all three of the main characters, but the fact that you really start like in a vault, if you've out there, you've seen the actress Ella Purnell, she really is mainly your main protagonist. That's your player character. is basically what I've told people about it. Um, yeah, not to talk everyone's ear off about it. I just wanted to provide more context of what Vault-Tec was. I'd encourage you to finish the season,
Hmm. Yeah.
Kasten. Um, to give my 2 cents on it, I thought it was as enjoyable and incredible. One, just someone who is by no means an average person who watches this. I'm the nerd who's played all the stuff and knows all the lore. And as great as the story, a complete story they told in season one, there's so much they still haven't covered. And I will say it is a story that has a genuine twist in it, but by the end of the season, you get the whole idea of kind of like what happened. Like you don't have to have played a minute or a second of the games to be a fan essentially by the end of the season. I just want to go ahead and say that.
Mm.
So you can talk more about kind of. I guess I'll shift it to what to this kind of question to you as well. Do you think we're kind of hitting this new era where video game lore making it to the small screen or the big screen is actually good? Because traditionally it hasn't been. Whenever it's been movies made
Yeah,
out
I
of video
mean,
game
I
lore,
think
and
it's
yeah,
good because I think it expands the games into a bigger audience than maybe didn't play them originally, like
or wouldn't play them at
um
all. Like wouldn't be
or at all.
exposed
Like
to
I
the
mean,
universe.
I went and with my PlayStation Plus subscription, I went and just downloaded Fallout 4, and so I
Yes.
started playing that just
Yes.
to try and like experience it
If you need any
because of
help,
the
let me
show.
know.
Like
They're
you
very
know what I
good.
mean? So it's so and stuff like The Last of Us, it it expands that. Uncharted, for
Yeah.
example, I mean, you can debate how good of a movie that was, but um
They're trying.
I mean I love the Uncharted series of games,
Oh, they're fantastic.
and
Yes.
so I'm hoping because they left that movie off with like maybe we'll be making more, so I hope that they end up getting around to making more. But um, it's just I think it all in all, as long as they're done well and they're not like awful, I think they're mutually beneficial to expanding new viewers to or new audiences to the games.
I agree. I think I'll go ahead and separate this as well. The Fallout season 1 show does not follow the story of any of the pre-existing games. Um the story that The Last of Us season 1 tells is literally the story of the first game.
Hmm.
They do it in a different way, but it's the same sequence of events that happens across those like 8 episodes or whatever it is. I think Fallout's in a vein to where the season is more showing you the world, but the story they're telling is unique to these characters.
I
And
think that's
yeah,
interesting because Uncharted was the kind of the same thing where the Uncharted thing wasn't really a plot line of any of the games either. And so The Last of Us, I think, is kind of just unique because it was essentially just a movie
right.
of an already very cinematic game. So
Yes.
that was it's kind of lives off in its own thing. But I think Fallout, for example, is a really, really awesome universe to do this in because there's so many stories you can tell
Yep.
that like that, and so there's just so many. I don't know if it's been, I mean, confirmed, but I would imagine season two is going to be a different story. Just
Season 2, all we know is that season 2 is confirmed.
okay,
I will say without any spoilers that they do very much lead into a season 2.
okay,
With the characters they establish in this season. So I would imagine what we're going to get is a continuation of that story.
okay,
Sorry, I
that
dropped
makes
my
sense.
phone on the ground.
Mhm.
So they could do like they could do that. What I can see, Case, and I will say this, I can see them obviously introducing several more plot points in a like an oft like B
Mhm.
storyline of season 2 that then eventually converges with the characters of this
Yeah.
season. I can totally see that because the big thing about the Fallout games and the world is there's so many factions post-war,
Mhm.
and you only really see one in yeah, you only really see one confirmed in this season, and it's the Brotherhood of Steel. And there's a lot of stuff that they show and imply towards the back end, which is spoiler heavy. So maybe we'll revisit it if you watch the rest of the season. In a future episode, doesn't be the next one or whatever. Um, but that is the difference. And circling back to Last of Us season 1, that was my one gripe with Last of Us season 1. It was like I'd rather watch a show set in the Last of Us world that doesn't involve Joel or Ellie or any of those characters at all, rather than a literal retelling of a story I've literally played twice. And the other thing is
Mhm.
there's something to be said that if you're going to do that, there's something about the way that media was presented in the first place that makes it important to the impact of the story. Now, by all accounts, they did a great job giving you that impact in the show. But when you have to play out that scenario, with the cordyceps fungus and everything, it first of all makes it way scarier, makes it more real, but also it's like, okay, I gotta play this out and get us like to where we got to go next. You know what I mean? Whereas you're just watching it and you feel like you're going along with the characters. Uh,
Right.
that was my one gripe with it, but I'm happy it exists. I just want to put it out there. And I'm happy that
Yeah, I think
yeah,
yeah, I definitely think that when you're talking about like making a TV or movie adaptation
it's an
over
adaptation. Yeah,
a video game, just expanding the lore of the universe is probably always the better way to go.
which it sounds
Be
like that's what they're going to do with season 2 of Last of Us. Sorry
yeah,
to interrupt you.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
yeah. So just because it's better because you're not like comparing it to the game and
Right. Like, yeah. So, in that regard, I think that's a massive advantage that Fallout has. I also think they played it pretty safe. The story they told was pretty in pocket. They didn't try to involve too many characters. Uh, and yeah, I just would encourage anyone out there who likes that kind of content to watch it. Again, it is not for the
Mhm.
faint of heart. It's a violent show. It's more on it. It makes sense that it's on the same network as like The Boys
Yeah.
and some of their other shows and
Yeah.
Invincible, right? Amazon has showed that they are willing to greenlight the more violent shows, animated or otherwise, right? So just wanted to make sure that's clearly out there because I know a
Yeah.
lot of even adults don't like that stuff. But I, yeah,
Yeah, I thought it was super cool. I mean, the guy who plays um the ghoul,
yes, I don't want to say his name, but yes, the Ghoul. The actor's name is Walton Goggins.
yeah, I saw an interview with him talking about how he made a point to not know anything about the franchise because he wanted to be the guy in the room to all the creatives saying, I don't understand this. Can we maybe explain it somehow? Because I don't get I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't
Because
I didn't know that, but that for where his
um,
character goes with what they show in the first season, it makes his reactions to stuff way cooler,
mhm.
way more realistic. So it's actually awesome that he did that.
Yeah, because it was important for him um to be able to be the guy to like help people who didn't to communicate via his acting like to the audience that might not know all of the lore and all of the stuff and yeah so
Right. Again, no spoilers. I will say that the Ghoul is my favorite character in the show. Uh, the further you go into the season, case, and you'll see why. like
Mhm.
the true emergence of like just his whole character arc. I can see a very incredible arc with him, with all of them really, but with him especially. Just with if you know a thing or two about the
Yeah.
Fallout lore and how ghouls came to be. So
No, I don't know if you ever it uh sorry I don't know
yeah,
if you saw Lost
I saw all of Lost, loved
but
Lost.
yeah
Yep.
we did talk about that but I was just like when
Ben
Doctor
from
yeah
Lost.
when Ben Linus showed up I was like what is he doing here like what
You know what's funny? I got to shout out my mom. I actually watched Lost like when it was happening, uh, like when I was young and when it was on TV, and then eventually finished it up with her years later. And she pointed that out immediately too. It's like, okay, so no matter what, Ben Linus is just lost and just is just his quirky, exact same character no matter what he's in. I'm like, yep. I'm like, hey,
yeah
it's Ben from Lost. It was like the first time Evangeline Lilly showed up in the MCU. I was like, hey, it's Kate from Lost.
yeah
Like literally anytime an actor from whatever, it's like it's always, oh hey, it's Hugo from Lost. Oh hey, it's Saeed from Lost. Oh hey, it's Jack from Lost. Like,
yeah
Lost was just one of those shows that like had such an ensemble cast that has like gone on to do great things that it lends itself to that. So yeah, it's Ben from
Yeah,
Lost.
that was a that was a great reference because the Saeed was in the Dropout
Yeah,
that movie about the what is it
I know what movie you're talking about.
the lady that went to prison. And then so I saw him in that and I was just like what the like this
It's
is
Saeed from
weird.
Lost.
Yeah, I was like Saeed.
It's yeah, and like if you're not familiar with Lost, not to get into that, but like the fact that you learn about every single character's backstory and it's like a 15 character cast, like you just and it was like what a six season show.
Yeah, no, I mean
So,
for anybody that's seen the whole show, you become very invested with all of these
hey,
characters.
it's John Locke from Lost.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, um, so yeah, he's in it. Ben from Lost. If you've seen Lost, he's in the show. He's in the second episode, so he plays a role. So anyway, I'm glad you're liking it, man. I'm really, really, really happy that it's done as well as it is.
Mhm.
I'm not surprised that this many people are now into the lore and the story because I've known for years how great the lore and story are and the series. It's more just like I didn't expect them, even if like I didn't expect it to be this good, to where oh no, like millions of people are playing the games for the first time, and like Bethesda's put out like these like posts on social media like hey, here's a tip for 4, here's a tip for tip list for 3, here's a tip list for 76, like for 1 and 2, like wherever you're jumping into the Fallout games, here's a list. I've seen way more streamers pick up the games, and it's like, or New Vegas too, same thing. Um, People are also like, and they made it clear you can start anywhere. You can start in any of the games. That's one of the beauties of the games. Like the mechanics are obviously going to be older in the older games, but you don't have to have played the originals to get what's going on. Like you can start right at 4, like you did. It's incredible, and so yeah, I'm very happy. Props to everyone involved, the cast, writers. Cannot wait for season 2, especially considering Fallout 5 is not going to happen for a long time. If you're familiar at all with the game sequence, the next game up for Bethesda Game Studios is the next Elder Scrolls game, and that's probably going to be a no whole 6-year endeavor in itself. Uh, that's an original thing that Bethesda Game Studios made, and then Fallout 5 after that. They've even jokingly said, "Oh yeah, we've put things together for Fallout 5." It's like that game isn't coming out for 11 years. So in the meantime, if we have this show, that'll be
I
cool.
mean, it's kind of a brilliant thing too, because they're making money on the show, but then they're also expanding the game audience, and so then when Fallout 5 does come out, they'll be able to make a lot more money on it.
There's also, and this has me. I'll get into this one little tangent, and then I'll be done. There's already a lot of rumors among the fandom and among my friends from home who are all very familiar with the games that they're going to use the show to lead into the 5th game. Because if you go by timing, you could realistically probably do 2 more seasons of Fallout in this whole thing. They're establishing on the West Coast. Bethesda has yet to do a West Coast Fallout game. Obsidian made New Vegas with Bethesda's help, right? With the assets.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're all owned by Microsoft. So they all just own the Fallout lore, right? It would be very, very cool if they go to like the Bay Area or some
Mm-hmm.
area in the West, or go back to the Boneyard, which is LA. The LA is referred to as the Boneyard in the Fallout universe. They all have nicknames, but they're all like nicknames of what they're called now versus pre-war world, right? It would be incredible if they do a thing where maybe we don't see characters from the show in the games, but there's repercussions of what has happened in the show that is now being dealt with in like as a major
Mm-hmm.
plot point of the 5th game. There's already the reason people are pointing that out is Bethesda and Todd Howard and other people have gone out of their way, and Microsoft have gone out of their way to say no, the show is canon to the games. So
Well,
they're not just saying that, which is cool.
maybe you could even end up
Yeah,
having characters from the show
you could.
in the games
You
as
really
like people
could.
you go to meet or whatever.
Right. Whatever they establish. And I think the one thing they got to be careful by doing that is you don't necessarily know how many seasons of a show you're going to get. If they know for a fact, okay, we're going to arc this story for like 3 seasons or 4
Mm-hmm.
seasons, then we'll have Fallout 5. Then it's like, okay, where did everybody end up? You know what I mean? Uh, that would be cool. And also, you might have a thing where we're not going to put any of those characters in. We'll just leave the show what it was. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but that the very idea that they could do that has me excited on a level that is hard to explain.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a really cool thing. It's also that's never been done before. You got different universes in different forms of media contributing to each other. It's awesome.
Right.
So that's what I got. Thanks for listening to me gush about Fallout, Casen, and everyone else.
Yeah.
Uh, if you're starting Fallout for the first time, first for context, Casen, Fallout 4 came out in 2015 fall, which was my 4th year of college. So you had just come to Bowling Green. I was super excited about it. I introduced Fallout to a lot of people for the first time, and people were asking me a lot of advice as they were playing 4, like literally every day in band. That's like when this happened, right? Uh, Fallout 4. So that's obviously, and Fallout 76 came out like 5 years ago. Had its own controversy when it came out, but it's an online Fallout game, basically. The other games are not. If you have any advice that you want me to give you, or do you have any questions about the game, I know so much about this, similar to Marvel, that I can give you advice without spoiling things. I can give you suggestions and perks and all that stuff. So if you're starting it for the first time, or you have any questions or comments on the show itself, let us know, because this is kind of like a kid on Christmas Day. How excited I am as far as never thought by 30 years old when I was playing a game that was so niche that it would be this popular at any point. So, yeah, cool stuff. Any final thoughts, my friend? It's good to be back. It's good to be back. Good to have my voice back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I'm glad we're all on the mend and doing better.
We are. We're headed into a great time of the year. It's getting warmer, and we'll be here to talk about all the cool stuff. So, this is Kellen,
This is Casen.
and we'll see you as always at the next stop.